list is an update on the Boring Company. As we've been talking about, they've been looking at a project in Miami. They have officially submitted a proposal, and Business Insider today revealing some of the details in that proposal. The proposal would be for a 6.2-mile system running from the North Beach of Miami out to the Golden Glades Transit Center. Initially estimated to carry more than 7,500 passengers per hour and potentially scaling up to more than 15,000 per hour. The estimated cost of the project was between $185 and $220 million, and they think they can do it in less than 3 years with expedited permitting. Funding the project, as always, seems to be the main question right now, so North Beach Miami Commissioner Michael Joseph saying that they're trying to obtain funding for the loop, seeking finance from regional, state, and federal governments. We'll keep an eye out for any more updates on that, but that will wrap it up for today and for the week. Hope everybody has an amazing weekend. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and sign up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast, and we'll see you on Monday for the February 21st episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you. Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here, and today we've got a couple of reports out of China to talk about. We've got September sales, and then we have some updates on Tesla's legal actions there to kind of fight back against some of the bad press they've received. And we've got some news on the Tesla Semi/Mega Charger, updates from India, a crash test video from Tesla, updates from CATL, LG, GM, all the abbreviations there, Lucid, and a couple other items as well. Nice day for Tesla stock today, finishing up 1 3/4% to $805.72, finally breaking through what seemed to be a pretty tough $800 stock price barrier. This is the first time since February 12th that Tesla's closed above $800 a share, so it marks a 7-month high. NASDAQ, on the other hand, was slightly down on the day, 0.14%, so year to date, Tesla now trails the NASDAQ by just 3.5 percentage points. Alright, so first up today, we finally got the China Passenger Car Association reports for the month of September, and it turns out that Tesla has, in fact, ended up with retail sales.
And we are live for a new episode of the Electrek podcast. Now we're live for an episode of the Electrek podcast. I am Fred Lambert, your host, and I am joined by Seth Winthrop. How are you doing this week, Seth?
I'm good.
Alright, you ready for the show? It wasn't that heavy of a news week this week, but there was a kind of a few news pieces that popped up, especially this one here about Elon Musk donating a lot of Tesla share that kind of shines a better light on the entire situation that came down late last year when, as you remember, there was the whole Twitter poll about selling 10% of his share that was initiated amongst like a lot of political and media pressure about rich people paying their taxes, and there was a weird talks about like paying taxes on unrealized gains and how the rich have got so much richer during the pandemic while the poorest part of the population has not made any gains. So amid all that talk, Elon makes his Twitter poll. It's like, if you guys are voting for it, I'm going to sell 10% of my stakes in Tesla. And then of course Twitter says go for it. But
what would have happened if they didn't vote? Because he had already kind of initiated that, right?
Well, then what started coming out after that is that, well, I mean, as he was saying that, we were already reporting, you have like billions in stock option to exercise that needs to exercise within the next year. So of course you're gonna have to pay like a lot of taxes in the next year. So yes, you're gonna have to sell some of your shares. Which he admitted later on, like on a podcast with Babylon D, that I had to do that and everything. But what we learned even before he made this Twitter poll in September, that was in November, so 2 months prior, he already agreed with the Tesla board on the plan for him to sell like billions worth of share in order to exercise those new stock option. So he was getting more shares from Tesla, so his stakes was expanding. But his tax burden was also going to be massive, and he was going to have to sell billions in shares to compensate with that. However, to stay somewhat true to the notion that he's going to sell 10% of his stake, he did sell a little bit more than he needed to cover, not just to cover the tax burden, but now at the same time, now what we're hearing is that in late November, so around that time when this was initiated, Elon sold just over 5 million share of Tesla. Donated to his charity. So Elon has his own charity that doesn't do that much like charity work in itself. So like necessarily for himself or like to do his own charitable work directly, but he gives money to other foundations, to his own foundation, which is a common way that rich people do these things. But what that's going to do too is going to change his tax burden too. For if you donate, you can, depending what kind of donation they are, some of them can be tax deductible. So maybe after all, if you combine that with the share that Elon sold, plus the one that he sold specifically for a tax burden as part of the agreed upon program in September, maybe Elon is actually going to get out of this thing in 2021 with a lot of liquidity actually. So that would be interesting to see what he ends up doing with that, on top of what he ends up actually giving the charities too, because we don't, the findings from Tesla didn't disclose, since it's going through his own foundation. We don't know exactly where that money is going, but it's the 5 million shares at the time was worth close to $6 billion. And where that raised an alarm, where it gets interesting, is that right around that time, it was being, it was a lot in the headlines because of a comment from the WFP, which is the World Food Program, which is an organization from the UN. David Beasley from that organization, the head of that organization, made a comment that only 2% of Elon Musk's wealth could solve world hunger. So it was kind of a comment that he said as part of a release of a plan for the World Food Program, that $6 billion would he put a $6 billion plan basically that would solve world hunger according to them. And put it in the context that, look, $6 billion with the 2% of Elon Musk's wealth, which is meant to well. So that was put in that context, but then of course the media went crazy with it, just clickbaiting it like crazy. And so Elon Musk was like, people were asking him whether to do it, did he just go some real well, everything. But then Elon went on Twitter and responded to one of those headlines by saying, if the WFP can describe on this Twitter thread exactly how $6 billion will solve world hunger, I will sell this stock right now and do it. Which some people took it, didn't think it well, that he was like requesting the plan in the thread as if the plan didn't exist, and as if it wouldn't work, because he was responding to that through a comment of someone that was like fact-checking that $6 billion wouldn't actually work. You don't have a good plan to do it. But the plan was already out there, and Elon like sort of requested it on Twitter, so he lives on Twitter and whatnot. But to the WFP's credit, they actually did it. They took their plan and broke it down as a Twitter thread. But that was the end of it. The news cycle moved on to something else at that point, so it didn't get that much attention. But that all happened during November, and then right after that, we just now this week through the SEC filing that Tesla filed, learned that Elon donated roughly $6 billion worth of share to charity, through his own charity. But the media has reached out to WFP, and they said that they haven't received any money from Elon yet. So they don't have any money. Doesn't mean that it doesn't intend to give it to them, but apparently hasn't made it to them. And then separately, Bloomberg reported that Elon has hired a specialist in effective altruism, which is a kind of charity that focuses on giving out money as efficiently as possible, so to try to avoid any traps like some of the most famous charities have been caught, like giving actually for every $1 that is given to them, something like only 10 cents actually ends up reaching the people in need, or whatever type of charity it is, while most of the money ends up being used for more fundraising for the salaries of the people involved in the charity and whatnot. So in order to avoid things like that and try to be as efficient as possible with the money that's in the donation, this movement called effective altruism put some time into any donation to make sure that it's going to be as efficient as possible. So Elon apparently hired some of the people behind this movement to give out that money. So whether it's going to end up with the WFP or not, it's still up in the air at this point. But so that started Elon's week pretty good. Elon donating like $6 billion. Then it went kind of downhill from there because Elon cannot sustain the appreciation from the public for so long, it looks like. And a bunch of things came out that, again, made this already controversial CEO of Tesla even more controversial. The biggest thing of more was yesterday with him tweeting this meme of Hitler comparing Trudeau to Hitler. To be fair, he took it down fairly quickly, but
I wonder if he took it down or if Twitter took it down.
Oh, that's a good question.
You know, Hitler is usually a bad idea. Like if you're just thinking about comedy, you know, it's kind of like the N-word of comedy. Just don't do it.
Yeah. Also, the tweet was within Hitler's perspective, making it sound like Trudeau was just as bad. Yeah, just as bad as Hitler, but even worse because actually Hitler had a budget, which of course people have me Trudeau. I'm not the biggest fan of Trudeau. Like I didn't vote for him in Canada, and I think he's like a born and bred politician, like just the average.
He's Quebecois, isn't he?
He is sort of, but like he spent most of his life outside of Quebec.
In Ottawa, right?
But I mean, his father was prime minister, so like he had to spend a lot of time in the capital. I think he went to school. No, he was a teacher in British Columbia, or went to school there, but he didn't spend that much time in Quebec. And I mean, I don't care about that. You don't have to spend time in Quebec.
How's his French?
His French is very good.
Okay, good.
Probably better than mine, to be honest. But he speaks a more proper French. Well, I'm more of a patois of the people. So, but anyway, it's more about his politics. I think he's like just a hardcore politician that just promises you something and then delivers whatever he wants to. Like he doesn't really care about not keeping his promises like most of a politician. For example, like he was elected. First time he got elected, he was elected on changing the political system, which in Canada, like you can literally get a majority with it's like 30% of people voting for you. You can get a majority of seat in the parliament and rule with a majority, which makes no sense. And just talking about let's change the political system here, like have a more modern one that makes more sense, that more people are happy with whoever's the leader in charge. But then he won with that system, so once he was elected and in power, it was like, you know what? It works for me, so why would I change it? And he didn't change it at all. So anyway, but still, comparing to Hitler, I mean, I'm not the most knowledgeable person about World War II, but I feel like Hitler did some things that are a little bit worse than that. But of course, now why people are already kind of mad with Elon is that his critique of Trudeau is coming out now most, not really about the budget or anything like that Trudeau did in the past, but about his handling of the protest, the freedom protest, the convoy of trucker that's been having a siege on Ottawa for the past few weeks, which they are doing it over some of the COVID restriction, more specifically about the vaccine mandates and at the border specifically, because that has been a problem for the system, especially like the U.S. truckers coming into Canada having to have a vaccine that has disrupted a lot of supply chain. So you would think that, I mean, if Elon had an argument that makes sense, like it would be, this is destroying your supply chain because you guys are not letting the flow of supply between Canada and the U.S. probably, but we haven't seen a lot of comments about that. I think it looks like he's more following through, like just and to be fair, like look, people are like, he's anti-vaccine. I mean, I'm not saying I'm for the protest in Ottawa, but they're not. They're clearly not anti-vaccine. They're anti the restriction that comes with it, which is hilarious right now because the cases are going down and everyone in Canada is lifting the restriction, even Quebec, which has been one of the most strict on that front. And now they are sort of like declaring victory, like, hey, we won, but like at the same time the cases are going down. I think and it has been doing like that for the last 2 years. Like the cases go up, more restriction, the cases go down, cases go up, more restriction, cases go down. So like this is just the cycle we're in. It looks like. But anyway, Elon is he's kind of boxing himself into this problem that we have right now, that okay, if you hold certain beliefs regarding the pandemic or a bunch of other subject, you are part of that team. And if a lot of Tesla fans are not part of that team, so he's kind of he's alienating a big part of the population, which he didn't used to. Like Elon used to be very good at being apolitical. Like he used to stay away from that stuff. He used to not say about who he's going to vote for. Not that I think he said it last time too, though he did hinted at it. That
he voted for Kanye, right?
Yeah, that was another.
We should have known at that point that things were going off the rails.
Yeah, I mean, because he was serious at first. Like he was, and then when someone pointed out like what can he stand for actually for as a presidential candidate, which of course like he stand for publicity, like it matches the release of an album or whatever. But what he stated he was for, like if his presidential race was actually going through, there was some really not really very well thought out things there. And then when someone pointed out to them, he was like, "Oh, maybe I should have think about that before." But I think his whole point was that he didn't like either option at the last election, which I think a lot of people were in that boat either way. But it's just a lot of controversies with Elon's that are just adding up on top of each other this week. And one thing that I really didn't like personally that is like, you know, there was this we talked about last week, the DFEH lawsuit that came out about the allegation of systemic racism specifically at Tesla's Fremont factory. So Tesla came out first with their blog post, and they downplayed the whole lawsuit, and then the actual lawsuit came out a day or two later, and it was way worse than Tesla made it seem like. It was way more the description of way more rampant kind of racism, and not just the way Tesla described it, which is like a bunch of production associates calling each other the N-word. It was quite not that. It would involve managerial position, it involved HR not being responsive, it involved a lot of like problem within the company itself. And Elon has yet to actually, or had yet to actually comment on it until he sort of did indirectly from a Twitter post here from Harold Frankpoppy, which is an influential person in the Tesla Twitter world that Elon often interacts with on Twitter, that wrote, Tesla drawing attention from the CDFEH, whose lawsuit I just mentioned, NHTSA, SEC, and the California DMV, all at the same time because they are upsetting unions, legacy auto, the oil industry, and automotive driving company, and not paying for ads or buying politicians. And then Elon agreed with that statement, saying exactly. So basically agreeing to why this lawsuit happened in the first place, because the FEH is mentioned in there, and then it's like the bunch of recall that happened recently, the SEC that subpoenaed Tesla again over Elon's use of Twitter, and the California DMV thing I don't really understand, but it's because Tesla is being basically disruptive to these industries by upsetting them, and also not paying ads, which Elon has linked to the media not liking them because they're not paying them, and buying politicians that Elon doesn't contribute to political campaign, or at least he doesn't do it anymore. He used to do it a little bit in the past, which I think is very dismissive, because so especially for the first one, especially for the DFEH lawsuit, the fact that this is the first time that Elon sort of commented on it, saying that this is only happening because of Tesla being disruptive and the industry not paying politician or whatever. Like, we're talking about 50 current former Tesla employees corroborating claims of racism at the factory. And again, we won't go into the details. Again, you can watch any previous podcasts or read the lawsuit that we posted on Electrek. Like, it is a lot of very serious claims in there. That would be because of those reasons. Like, this is like, I don't like that. And I mean, this kind of conspiracy theory, like that's what it is really, has been going on for a while in the Tesla fan community. Like especially the NHTSA. I think they were like, oh, there's 4 recalls in a row from NHTSA. But if you actually look at the recalls from NHTSA that happened, yeah, it's kind of weird. 4 in a row from in like space of 3 weeks, and I do think that all of them are fixed by over-the-air software updates. So like, okay, it's not that big of a deal. But then if you actually look at the details of each of those recall, like it's not like it's not some kind of conspiracy that they all happened within the 3 weeks. First of all, 2 of them weren't even initiated by NHTSA. One was initiated by a Korean, the Korean equivalent of NHTSA, and then the same problem was just found in Tesla vehicle in the US too, so NHTSA had to issue the same recall. That was for the seatbelt chime. Another one was the heat pump issue, which was a very real issue that people like were experiencing very real problem, and that was also initiated by Transport Canada and then replicated by NHTSA. So again, what's like, it's not even NHTSA like doing here. Like Tesla admitted there was a real problem, and then they had to do it. I guess you can argue like, oh well, why make it a recall and everything? Well, we explained that when we discussed the lawsuit. It was because of the defrosting. If you cannot have the defrosting of your windshield, it's an actual safety issues, and they had to make a safety recall, all of it. And then we can argue, of course, the one with the rolling stop, the one with the rolling stop, and the one was the boombox thing. Those, I admit, they are
Serial investigations, some of which one investigation being closed, only for another one to be opened at the exact same time. There's been no finding of any wrongdoing. They say enough is enough. Mr. Musk and Tesla write in the hope that the court can bring the SEC's harassment campaign to an end while ensuring the SEC finally delivers at long last on its commitment to Tesla shareholders and this court. So we'll see what comes of it. Obviously, I've talked before about how a lot of these investigations haven't really seemed to make a ton of sense to me, not being a lawyer, of course, but those restrictions that Elon agreed to left a lot of wiggle room, and I'm sure that's why he was okay agreeing to them. Do I sometimes think Elon pushes it? Do I sometimes not agree with things that Elon tweets? All the time. I mean, today, perfect example of that. There was a meme that was in poor taste. Elon ended up deleting it. But sometimes things like that are going to negatively impact people's perception of Tesla, of Elon, and make the target on their back even larger. And that's a little bit tangential to what we're talking about here with the SEC stuff, but on that front, I am glad to see that Tesla is pushing back for the rights that they believe that they have. All right, from one government organization over to another, moving on from the SEC over to NHTSA. NHTSA yesterday has opened up a preliminary investigation into Tesla's autopilot due to unexpected activation of braking system, otherwise known as phantom braking. So the Office of Defects Investigation has received 354 complaints on this over the last 9 months. Now, I think we all understand that phantom braking does happen. There seems to be this narrative that has increased since Tesla has gone to vision only. That has not been my experience at all. I really haven't noticed any difference, and it's very infrequent for me, but I don't know, maybe other people have different experiences. Regardless, what I think is the most important thing here is that out of these 354 complaints, there have been 0 reports of crashes or fires, 0 injuries, and of course, 0 fatalities. So yes, phantom braking might be a little bit jarring, might be a little bit scary, feels unsafe, but no crashes reported on it. Now, here's where things get a little bit tricky because obviously Tesla's not just intentionally slamming on the brakes. They're doing that when they think that there is something that they need to do that for. It's a false positive, and ideally, you're not going to have any false positives, but we also don't have level 5 autonomous driving vehicles yet. And in the meantime, you'd really want to have a bias towards not ignoring false positives because some of them are not going to be false. They're going to be true positives where you do need to stop fast. And unlike a false positive that's causing an uncomfortable braking event but no crashes, there are true positives that are likely preventing crashes, but we're not going to see a NHTSA report on that number. That's an unknown. Now, I'm sure to reduce phantom braking events, to comply with any, government pressure, Tesla could easily require higher confidence in events like that are causing phantom braking, but doing that is going to increase the risk of it not stopping when it needs to stop.